Here's what nobody tells you about grinding nonstop. Your brain isn't impressed by your work ethic. While you're out here collecting productivity badges like they're achievement points, your mental operating system is quietly degrading in the background. The game changed, but you're still playing by outdated rules. What if I told you that the smartest thing you could do right now isn't working harder, but strategically powering down? Sounds counterintuitive? That's exactly why most people miss it. Why high performers protect their downtime like it's classified intel. Let's flip the script on everything you've been sold about success. The hustle mythology convinced you that more hours equals more results. That sleep is for the weak. That boundaries are for people who don't want it bad enough. All lies wrapped in motivational packaging. Here's what actually separates top performers from burnout casualties. They treat rest as non-negotiable infrastructure, not optional luxury. They understand something fundamental that grinds against popular belief. Your cognitive capacity is a finite resource that depletes with use and requires intentional recovery. Think about your phone battery. You don't wait until it hits zero to charge it, right? You plug it in strategically throughout the day. Yet somehow, with your brain, you run it down to emergency mode daily and wonder why everything feels harder, slower, foggier. Research from the National Institutes of Health found that chronic sleep restriction and inadequate recovery periods significantly impair cognitive function, emotional regulation, and decision-making abilities. Translation: that all-nighter you pulled didn't make you more productive. It made you measurably dumber for the next 72 hours. But here's where it gets interesting. The cultural programming runs so deep that even when you know rest matters, you still feel guilty taking it, like you're somehow cheating the system by not maximizing every waking moment. That guilt, that's not your intuition. That's conditioning. You've been taught to measure worth by output, to quantify value through visible effort. But the most valuable work your brain does happens offline. Pattern recognition, creative synthesis, problem-solving breakthroughs. None of that happens while you're grinding through email. Number 73. Peak performance isn't about intensity. It's about oscillation. Sprinters don't run marathons. Musicians rest between movements. Athletes periodize training. Your brain needs the same cyclical approach. Focused work followed by genuine recovery, not pseudo-rest where you're still half plugged into the matrix. The system profits when you never fully disconnect. Because exhausted people don't question things. They just comply, consume, keep moving. Real power comes from stepping back far enough to see the game clearly. When you look at your daily routine, are you actually resting or just switching from one form of mental consumption to another? How disconnecting became the ultimate competitive advantage nobody talks about. Want to know the real performance hack that Silicon Valley executives use but rarely advertise? Strategic unavailability. Sounds simple, almost too obvious, but most people will never implement it because it requires something uncomfortable, trusting that the world continues just fine without your constant monitoring. The addiction to connectivity isn't about necessity. It's about control and the illusion of importance. Every notification you check reinforces the story that you're needed, relevant, indispensable. And that feels good until you realize it's a cage disguised as validation. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If your value depends on being perpetually available, you're not valuable, you're just convenient. There's a massive difference. Valuable people set terms. Convenient people accept whatever terms are dictated to them. Look at how the game actually works. People who never set boundaries get assigned more work because they've signaled unlimited capacity. People who protect their time get respected because scarcity creates value. It's basic economics applied to attention. But there's resistance wired into this. My industry doesn't allow downtime. My clients expect immediate responses. My team needs constant access. Every one of those statements translates to, I haven't established clear operating parameters, so I'm at the mercy of everyone else's agenda. Here's what changed everything for me. Realizing that urgency is almost always manufactured. True emergencies are rare. What feels urgent is usually just poorly planned, anxiety-driven, or manipulative pressure disguised as necessity. When you disconnect strategically, something fascinating happens. People adapt. They solve problems without you. They respect your boundaries because you've demonstrated they're real, not suggestions. And paradoxically, your perceived value often increases because you're no longer the person who says yes to everything. The counterintuitive reality is that being less available often makes your contributions more impactful. When people know they have limited access to your time and energy, they bring better questions, clearer requests, more thoughtful approaches. Disconnection isn't retreat. It's strategic positioning. It's refusing to participate in a culture that mistakes motion for progress, presence for performance. What would become possible if you operated from a place of energy surplus instead of constant deficit? Say, your exhaustion is actually a design feature, not a bug? Let's get brutally honest about what's really happening. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed. You're exhausted because exhausted people are easier to manage, less likely to question authority, more willing to accept unacceptable conditions. Think about it. When you're running on fumes, what do? You narrow your focus to survival. You stop thinking big picture. You abandon long-term planning for short-term coping. You become reactive instead of strategic. Perfect recipe for keeping people in place. The productivity industrial complex sells you tools, courses, hacks to squeeze more output from the same hours. But nobody's teaching you the most radical skill: knowing when to stop. Because stopping doesn't generate revenue. Stopping doesn't create dependency on the next optimization system. Your body speaks in signals: fatigue, irritability, brain fog, reduced joy in things that used to excite you. These aren't character flaws requiring more willpower to override. They're data points indicating your operating system needs maintenance. But we've been conditioned to ignore biological feedback in favor of arbitrary metrics. Hit the deadline regardless of cost. Attend the meeting despite being mentally checked out. Respond to the message even though you're supposed to be off. Each override teaches your nervous system that its signals don't matter. Here's where it shifts. What if you started treating your energy like your most scarce resource? Not time, not money, but the actual capacity to show up fully present and effective. Everything changes when you optimize for sustainability instead of short-term output. Companies understand this with equipment. Machines get preventive maintenance. Systems have redundancy. Infrastructure has built-in recovery protocols. But humans are expected to self-optimize infinitely without structured recovery. Because admitting we need it seems weak. The breakthrough comes when you realize that powering down isn't failure. It's the most sophisticated form of performance optimization available. It's when your subconscious processes information, when creativity emerges, when insights crystallize. You're not lazy for needing rest. You're human, operating in a system designed to extract maximum value while providing minimum support for sustainability. If you redesigned your life around energy management instead of time management, what's the first thing you'd change? Drop one word in the comments describing how different your life would look with guilt-free disconnection. Hit like if this perspective shifted something. And subscribe for more reality checks the mainstream won't give you. What actually happens when you finally give yourself permission to unplug? So here's the tactical playbook for making this real, not just theoretical self-help. That sounds good, but changes nothing. Start with non-negotiable recovery blocks. Not, if I have time, but scheduled, protected, defended. Treat them like critical business meetings, because that's exactly what they are. Meetings with your future self, who either thanks you or resents you for today's choices. Create communication protocols that reflect reality. Establish response windows. I check messages twice daily at AM and PM isn't rude. It's professional boundary setting. People who respect you will adapt. People who don't, we're extracting value, not building relationships. Implement digital sunset rituals. Devices off 2 hours before sleep isn't deprivation. It's cognitive hygiene. Your brain needs transition time between input mode and recovery mode. Scrolling until you pass out isn't rest. It's consciousness interruption. Replace constant stimulation with intentional boredom. This is the hardest part because we've been algorithmically conditioned to fear empty moments. But breakthrough thinking happens in blank spaces, not during content consumption. Schedule nothing time. Literally calendar blocks labeled nothing. Stop romanticizing grind culture. Those "I'll sleep when I'm dead" posts, they're often from people heading toward exactly that outcome faster than necessary. Real legends in any field protect their recovery with the same intensity they bring to their work. Learn to distinguish between productive discomfort and destructive depletion. Growth requires challenge. Burnout requires intervention. If you can't tell the difference anymore, you're already past the warning stage. The final piece nobody wants to hear: some situations require exit, not optimization. If your environment fundamentally doesn't support sustainable operation, no amount of personal boundary setting fixes structural toxicity. Sometimes the answer is leaving, not adjusting. When the mission ends, you disconnect completely, not because you don't care, but because the next mission demands your best version, and that version only exists when you've actually recharged, not just performed rest while staying partially plugged in. Your brain isn't a machine. It's a biological system with specific needs that, when ignored, leads to predictable breakdown. Honor those needs or pay the price. The choice has always been yours. What fear is really stopping you from implementing what you already know you should do? Tell us in the comments what boundary you're committing to this week. Like if this challenged your thinking, subscribe to keep exposing what the productivity industrial complex doesn't want you knowing, and share this with someone still trapped in the always-on trap.